Now, let me just tell you that in the U.S., integrative medicine is now a very established movement. There is a group that I helped found called the Consortium of Academic Health Centers for Integrative Medicine. We now have 35 member medical schools in the U.S. and Canada, and these are leading medical schools. It's Harvard, Georgetown, Duke, UC San Francisco, UCLA, and so forth. And its involvement at levels of deans and chancellors who recognize that medical education, medical research, and medical practice have to move in this direction. This integrative medicine movement is also very strong in Scandinavia. It's strong in China. It is happening in Japan. You can see it beginning to happen all over. I feel very strongly that integrative medicine is the way of the future. Not only is it the kind of medicine that patients want, and patients are very clear about that they want doctors who can spend time with them, who can understand them, who will not just look at them as physical bodies, who won't just tell them that the only way to deal with your problem is take these drugs, who are open to ideas about questions about other forms of medicine, who can give you advice about how to shop in a health food store, about how to eat, about how to use dietary supplements. Patients are very clear about that. Increasingly, it is the kind of medicine that physicians want to practice because, as I said, so many of them find the exclusive practice of interventionist allopathic medicine to be unsatisfying. But I think more important, integrative medicine makes economic sense. It has the potential of lowering healthcare costs while preserving outcomes because it can bring lower cost treatments into the mainstream that are safe and effective. I'll give you one example, and this is relevant to where we are today. I have become known as one of the few physicians who promotes breathwork, who teaches patients and doctors to use breathing as a primary therapy. I learned none of this in medical school. I learned about this from two sources. The first was from studying yoga, because one division of yoga, pranayama, is about breathing. And the second was from working with old osteopathic physicians, doctors who use this system of manipulation of the body by hands, and some of whom place a great deal of emphasis on breathing patterns. From those two sources, I learned information about the practical use of breath control to affect physiology. There has been very, very little research on breathing, certainly in the Western world. There's been a little bit in India, but it is basically an unresearched subject. So here is something that you could say has no scientific basis, and yet I think the harmfulness potential here is extremely low. So this is certainly something I'm willing to experiment with while encouraging people to do the necessary research. But this is a plausible therapy. The basic theory of breath work is that breathing is the only function of the body that you can do completely consciously or completely unconsciously. It can be a totally voluntary act or a totally involuntary act. Actually, there's one other function like that, eye blink, but I don't know of anybody who's made use of eye blink as a therapeutic method. Breathing is controlled by two different sets of nerves, by the involuntary nerves and the voluntary nerves. The theory of breath work is that by imposing rhythms on breathing with the voluntary system, you gradually induce these rhythms in the involuntary system, the autonomic nervous system, and thereby can influence the function of all internal organs, of circulation, of heart rate, of digestion, and so forth. And in general, the diseases that result from disturbances in these systems, high blood pressure, heart arrhythmias, for example, many kinds of chronic digestive disorders, are not conditions that allopathic medicine treats effectively. I regularly teach a very simple, relaxing breath, a pranayama breath, that takes all of about 30 seconds to do to patients that I work with. And over the years, I think of all of the recommendations that I've given to patients, this is the one that I've gotten the most positive feedback about. I have met people who've lowered high blood pressure using this, people who have corrected conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, people whose hands have been cold all their lives, whose hands are now warm. I now have, I think, 4 well-documented cases of people who've stopped atrial fibrillation just using this breathing technique, something I wouldn't have thought was possible. That's usually a heart arrhythmia that requires more drastic intervention. So here is a method that's completely free. It uses no equipment. It's incredibly time efficient. It has everything to recommend it. First of all, why aren't people studying this? I think the answer is it's just too simple. It seems too simple. It's not taken seriously in an age when we are fascinated by high-tech solutions to everything. And this is just one example of something that's out there in the world beyond conventional medicine, that if brought into the mainstream, just think what this could do in terms of numbers of prescriptions that would not have to be written, of drug toxicity that could be ended, of conditions that had plagued people that could be easily stopped. This is just one example of the many, many things that exist in the world, as I said, often in other systems of medicine and other traditions of medicine that are not currently taught in conventional schools of medicine, that allopathic physicians are unaware of because they haven't been taught about them, that if we brought it into the mainstream could improve outcomes and lower costs. Now, I'm fascinated, I used the breathwork deliberately because this is something that comes from an ancient tradition here in India. I think for me, India, I first came to India in 1959, and I've made a number of visits here since. Increasingly, I've had a number of physicians from India who've come to study with me at the University of Arizona. And I'm fascinated by India because it's a unique example in the world of a country in which a number of different traditional medical systems have had long, illustrious histories and are currently actively taught. And there is even attempt now at federal regulation of these different systems and setting standards for them. At the moment, these systems, although there is, you can access Ayurvedic preparations, homeopathic preparations in many Indian pharmacies, I think the integration of these systems has not really happened here, but there's potential for that. And I think there's greater potential here than there is anywhere else that I know of. In China today, I think this is interesting. In all big Chinese cities and big hospitals, cancer patients get both types of medicine. They get chemotherapy, radiation surgery, and they get Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture. And the Chinese experience is that this combination improves outcomes, enables doctors to use lower doses of chemotherapy, lower doses of radiation, that they're better side effect profiles. I mean, this is an example. In the West, where I live, it's the very, very exceptional cancer patient who is able to use both of these kinds of worlds simultaneously. But I think in India, there's an even greater potential to do this. And as I said, I firmly believe this is the future. I think that as the healthcare crisis deepens, the economic pressures to find a way of lowering healthcare costs are going to increase enormously. And as that happens, I think the wisdom of the integrative approach will become apparent. And I can absolutely envision that it is in this country, and this country first, that models of integrative medicine can be developed both for inpatient and outpatient care that might serve as models that can be replicated around the world. And I think this would be a fantastic contribution of your country to medicine and healthcare. Before I conclude, let me just say a word about, you talked a lot about longevity and living longer and living well. My most recent book was called Healthy Aging, and it was an exploration of some of these questions. And let me just give you a quick summary of my thinking in this area. In my country at the moment, there is a tremendous obsession with anti-aging. There is even a great growth of a specialty called anti-aging medicine. We have an American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine that now has thousands of physician members. I went to one of they hold enormous annual conventions in Las Vegas, appropriately, and I went to one of them as undercover as I could a few years ago to see what went on there. It's an interesting mix. There are some material in anti-aging medicine and some practices that make sense to me, especially reasonable information about diet and use of dietary supplements. But it's all mixed up with things that seem very silly to me, like a tremendous emphasis on cosmetic surgery, for example, and appearance. And the people who founded this American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine came from the world of competitive bodybuilding. So their vision of what it is to be a healthy old person is to be a senior bodybuilder. And I think that's rather foolish. Also, the products and services recommended under the banner of anti-aging medicine in general have very little scientific evidence to support them. These are often expensive interventions. Some of them, I think, are potentially dangerous, especially use of hormonal therapies. But most of all, the very concept of anti-aging bothers me. Aging is a universal process. Everything in the universe ages. Animals age, plants age, mountains age, stars age. If everything in the universe ages, if this is written into the laws of the universe, then to set your goal as anti-aging means to put yourself in a very wrong relationship with nature, and that's not a good place to be. If anti-aging is not, I mean, I personally, having reviewed all the science in this area, I don't think it's possible to stop the aging process or to reverse the aging process. If anti-aging is not a legitimate goal, then what is? Now, I've called it healthy aging, and that means focusing on maintaining health as you go through life, so that at any age you have the energy and the capability of enjoying life, of meeting its demands, and so forth. All of us at some point will get sick and die. If we look at aging in our populations, we see that as people get older, and especially as they pass the age of 60, large categories of disease become more frequent. The big ones are cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. So these are called the age-related diseases. The question that I asked in this book is, are these diseases necessary consequences of aging? Are these aspects of the aging process? And there I think the answer clearly is no. That it is possible to separate aging from age-related disease. And therefore the legitimate goal seems to me to work towards reducing the risk and delaying the onset of these diseases which currently shorten lives prematurely and make the latter part of life unpleasant and unsatisfying for so many people. There's a technical term for this strategy. I didn't invent it. It's been in the medical literature, but I've been trying to popularize it. It's called compression of morbidity, a lovely term where morbidity has the medical meaning of sickness. So the idea is that you're trying to squeeze the time of disability and decline at the end of life into as short a period as possible. So the idea is to live long and well and then have a rapid drop-off at the end. I think that's what we'd all like to do. There are examples of this. There was a wonderful story that circulated in the States some months ago about a Los Angeles transit worker who had worked at the job every day until he was 101. And on his 101st birthday, his coworkers gave a huge party for him, and he died the next day. That's compression of morbidity, and that's what I urge you all to work toward achieving. And how you do that is by learning and applying the principles of healthy living, by learning and as early in life trying to make corrections in how you eat, in how you exercise, in how you handle stress, in all of this. And also, I think the economic consequences of this are also profound. If we are going to, if this huge population of old people that we are going to experience in all of our societies does not begin to adopt the strategies that lead to compression of morbidity, then the additional burden on already strained healthcare systems is unsupportable. On the other hand, if we can incentivize people to begin to work toward compression of morbidity, then the consequence of having this demographic change are much less. So those are the main messages that I want to leave you with. I hope you have some sense of what integrative medicine is. I want you to hear again my very firm conviction that this is the future of medicine. I also firmly believe that this is a solution, or a big part of the solution, of the healthcare crisis that's going to affect all of us. And again, I emphasize to you that I think India is in a very special position, potentially, to be the place where new models of medicine, of healthcare delivery can be developed that can be replicated around the world. Thank you.
Dr. Andrew Weil has highlighted the concept of integrative medicine. And I think the underlying principle as we got it is all knowledge to treat must be inclusive and not work in the compartments. And in India, I think we have very rich knowledge. In addition to allopathic medicine, we have Ayurveda, you have Unani, you have naturopath. Then you also have meditation and yoga. And it is a combination of all this in treating disease and maintaining good health is essential. I think that's the sum and substance of your message. I would now invite some questions. Yes.
Thank you very much for your excellent talk. I don't know if you're aware, but a few of us have been following you around secretly over lunch and dinner to observe what you eat. There have been mixed reports. Some people think you don't eat anything. So it would be wonderful if you share what you have eaten in the convention or what you would eat normally.
I'm used to having people observe what I eat or don't eat. I think I'm very good about my diet. I like food. I enjoy food. I grow a lot of my own food in Arizona, and I like to cook, so I enjoy preparing food for myself and for others. I was for, let's see, since 1970, I grew up eating a quite mainstream American diet, but around 1970, when I made a lot of changes in my life, in 28, I became a vegetarian, and for many years I was a lacto-vegetarian. And then, for a variety of reasons, I began eating fish. And I'm very convinced that one of the most serious nutritional deficiencies in the world is omega-3 fatty acids, and that these are absolutely essential to optimum health, both physical and mental health. Now, if you choose, so I do not eat meat. I don't eat poultry. I eat some dairy products. I love the yogurt lassi in India. I think it's terrific. I like some good quality cheese. I generally don't eat eggs. Sometimes if I travel, I do. And I eat fish and also take a supplement of fish oil. If you choose, for vegetarian reasons, not to eat fish, I would really urge you to think about maximizing your intake of vegetarian sources of omega-3 fatty acids, as well as to consider taking a supplement of the preformed omega-3s. And there are some available that are made from algae, so they should not be objectionable to vegetarians. I think the greatest problem in the modern diet is the extent to which manufactured, processed, refined, fast food have displaced natural whole foods in the diets of many people. This, to me, is the greatest change that's happened in the past 50 years. If I look at, when I grew up in the 1950s, our family always had 2 meals together. My mother prepared food from scratch. Today, the percentage of American families that even sit down to 1 meal together is astonishingly and depressingly low. And most people, the idea of preparing a meal from fresh ingredients seems very old-fashioned. People say they don't have time, they don't know how to do it, too labor-intensive. And I have always tried to show people that it's possible to make foods that are delicious and healthy and easy and quick. But this is a great obstacle. So I think this is the real problem. And almost whenever we take a food in nature and tinker with it, the overwhelming probability is that we reduce its nutritional value and increase its dangerousness.
Can I ask a question, please?
I think what is happening here is that Dr. Andrew Weil is warning us not to go to what's happening in the West fast enough, and be cautious and make sure that the health dynamics which we have somehow inherently there, we preserve that and still move forward. I'll take the next question. Just state your name and...
I'm Mohini Bhola. I work for India Today. I'd like to ask Dr. Weil, is there a safe way of losing weight if you've been fat all your life?
The safest way to lose weight is to decrease the intake of calories and increase the expenditure of calories. So that means, I'm afraid that is the basic equation. However, I think that within that, I think learning the principles of healthy nutrition is very useful. I know many people who've lost weight just by cutting out fast food, or just by cutting out refined food, or just reducing the amount of products they eat that are made from flour as opposed to truly whole grains. I think that, the principles of healthy nutrition, if you apply them without even thinking about losing weight, will help people, most people, weight will normalize, especially if you are maintaining moderate, regular physical activity. You told me that, you had a problem because you loved to walk and did strenuous walking and injured your ankle. So I think in that case, you want to find an alternate method of expending calories. So whether that, it might be cycling, using a stationary bicycle, swimming, but something that you have to make up for that change that happened.
Is there any? Dr. Tran.
Yeah, I enjoyed your talk, Dr. Weil, I'm sure, like everybody else did. What we're really looking at is, we're talking about the engines of change, progress, quote unquote, prosperity will chug at double speed around the world. There's no escaping that. And then there's that law of unintended consequence. And that you just actually enumerated as not being able to have a single meal and, with the family, it's a rarity, and the fact there is junk food and there's all this. These are all consequences of the same stream, and we are all in the middle of it, so they're not going to change. Now the question is, given your depth of knowledge on some of the other additional things that we can add to what we hear from cardiologists, cardiac surgeons like me on a daily basis, is to say, exercise 40 minutes, eat less cholesterol, less seafood, less this, less that. We do that all the time. But you know that by the time you leave the hall, it already starts fading in your mind. Like somebody who said to me, he said, doctor, I've been thinking about your advice. Every morning when I wake up, I get this great urge to go and exercise. But in about 15 seconds, it passes. So what I want to take home message from you is to say, we are in the middle of all this. We are in the middle of, we've got 10 minutes to eat. You're going to run somewhere to the next door, whatever junk food or fast food place there is. Are there other things that you can add which don't exist in our modern medicine knowledge, which would contribute to actually coping with stress, bad eating habits, stress being released by alcohol intake? Those are the things I think that are on top of the mind of every executive that walks in this area, to know what are your take on that. Thank you.
An earlier book that I wrote was called 8 Weeks to Optimum Health, and it's been very popular. And I think one reason why people like it and why it works well is that it asks people to make gradual changes in lifestyle, to do things in little steps and build on them. A common problem I see is that people make resolutions that that are too big, they're too much, and so they'll try it for a little while and then give it up. I think if you work to adjust lifestyle gradually, just little bits here, maybe some extra walking a few times a week, making an effort to make one meal that you cook for yourself, for example, that this is a way that people can begin to get into this, and then very quickly you see positive changes, you feel better, so then there's increased motivation. In cardiology especially, and by the way, this is one of the specialties that seems most open at the moment to integrative medicine. I think the big omission is in the mind-body area. Yes, we tell people to exercise and take omega-3 fatty acids and take aspirin and all of that, but rarely are recommendations made about how to change mental state, emotional states that may have very damaging effects on heart function. And I think there are technologies. There are both ancient ones like pranayama breathing and meditation, and there are modern ones like cognitive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, that can fairly efficiently show people how to identify and change negative patterns of thinking. So I think there's a whole range of technologies out there under the general banner of mind-body medicine that would be very useful to bring in to the conventional mix.
Just an additional question to what Dr. Prehan has asked. Yeah, I'm cardiologist in Apollo Hospital, Delhi, and Dr. Trehan has been my teacher also, interventional cardiologist. I just wanted to know, other than what we are already doing in preaching lifestyle, medications, and all those things, what is your opinion regarding these so-called antioxidants, ginseng, coenzyme 10? There's so many horde of antioxidants available, which we are of course prescribing. But what is your opinion about whether they really do help in preventing or heralding this atherosclerosis or not?
Sure. You've asked about different things there, and I would urge you, if you have questions like this, if you go to my website, drweil.com, you'll find these questions answered. You can look up any treatment or therapy or substance. But CoQ10, for example, I think this is a very useful antioxidant, and there's a great deal of medical literature to support its use. It improves outcome in congestive heart failure. I think it's very useful for improving oxygen use by heart muscle. There has been a relatively recent study showing that high doses slow the progression of Parkinson's disease. I take this myself. I recommend it to many people. Ginseng is a more complicated story. This is there's a number of plants that are related to ginseng and different preparations of it. This was not taken seriously by Western scientists for many years, and I think one reason was that the Chinese traditionally said it was good for everything. And when we hear that something is good for everything, we lose interest in it. We think that means it can't be working by a specific pharmacological mechanism. But the compounds in ginseng are very interesting. They're called ginsenosides, and they appear to work on the pituitary adrenal axis. They affect metabolism. I think these are relatively safe. I think there are uses to them. But you need to know how to buy ginseng preparations, which ones are good, which ones are not good, whether there are any potential dangers there, and what the reasons would be for using them. So I think there's no one answer to that question. Some of these things that are available in health food stores and sold, I think, are extremely useful. And others, I think, are very questionable. That I don't think there are too many things out there that are harmful. There's some, but I think there are many that are wastes of money. And so it's very worth educating yourself about them. And how wonderful it would be if your doctor could answer those questions, or your pharmacist. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do at the University of Arizona, is to train health professionals to be knowledgeable in these areas so that they can advise patients.
We are running out of time, and I will take 3 questions. Ms. Naveen Jindal.
Dr. Weil, you mentioned that meditation and pranayam is being very, very effective, and just a 30-second pranayam. So could you please tell us that which form of pranayam should we practice and which form of meditation, because in India we have too many of them. Thank you.
The base, I've looked at a lot of pranayama practices, and I've tried to simplify them and take the basics from them. I think, the first principle of breath work is to try to make breathing deeper, slower, quieter, and more regular. That those are the 4 qualities you want to develop in breathing. So whenever you think about it, if you're waiting in a line somewhere, if you're sitting at a stoplight, if you can make your breathing deeper, slower, quieter, more regular, this is very useful. And I think with all breath work, that the idea is that by doing this, even if it's a short amount of time, but if you do it regularly, over time, over weeks and months, this will tend to become unconscious, and breathing will tend to move in this direction. Another principle is to try to deepen exhalation, because that's the phase of breathing that you have more voluntary control over. So that if you practice squeezing more air out of your lungs, you automatically take more air into your lungs, and over time, breathing becomes deeper. So those are examples of just some simple principles that are very easy to teach and practice. You'll find more of this, again, on my website, in my books. I have an audio program on breathing that gives some detailed instructions.
I'll take the lady from there.
Mala Sekri from Prevention Magazine. You talked about the mind-body connection earlier this morning as well. And with my apologies to doctors here, how much emphasis is being placed in medical schools on doctors to be empathetic, to be sympathetic to patients, because I think that plays a large role in their healing process, and to listen, which you touched upon. But very often, I think, half the damage is done when the doctor says you're in a bad shape.
I couldn't agree with you more. I saw an article recently that studied doctor-patient interactions, and said that this was in the United States, that the average time in a first encounter between a doctor and a patient, when the patient started talking until the doctor interrupted the patient, was 7 seconds. So this isn't to answer your question about not listening. Now, in terms of how much we teach this, I think maybe it's given lip service, but not much. There was an innovation at the University of Arizona College of Medicine a few years ago, which I thought was great, which was in the admissions committee when interviewing candidates for admission to medical school. They added to the interviewers a patient. And the patient's job was to comment on that aspect, on empathy and how well the doctor listened. And there have been some cases where a student applicant had very high scores in all the standardized tests, and the doctors who interviewed him thought he was great, and the patient vetoed it, said, you know, absolutely unacceptable as the physician. So this is one way of doing that. Before I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine. One of my students is here who has just completed the integrative medicine training at the University of Arizona, and she happens to be a native of Kerala. And I'm encouraging her to come back to India and be involved in integrative medicine here. Would you stand up, Nina? This is Nina Thomas. She's a family medicine doctor who did her residency in the States and then came to the University of Arizona to study integrative medicine. So if you have questions about this process and the kind of training, you know, please ask her. She's an example of this new generation of physicians.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weil. I'm sorry, Suketu, I cannot allow you to ask the question. Our time is up completely. And on behalf of all of you, I would like to thank Dr. Andrew Weil for his wonderful and a very insightful talk and discussion.
Thank you.
May I request Mr. Arun Puri to kindly present the mementos.